It's a fantastic area to be in. I spent a good part of 18 years in markets, and extremely fascinating area in more ways than one. And I would strongly recommend it to anybody who has liking for markets or anything that moves or any kind of risk management. And it's rewarding in more ways than one. The ways in which you can actually be part of that ecosystem of global markets is a whole bunch. So the traditional ways when Jaishankar, Anjali, and I passed out was to effectively go into an investment bank of some kind and be a part of the sales and trading setup there. So either be part of trading or be a salesperson or a structurer or a asset liability manager and so on and so forth. Clearly, things have been changing since then. So there is a lot more of opportunities which have come out now. Jaishankar mentioned a couple of them on the corporate side and on research, credit rating, and so on and so forth. And you also have to keep in mind that the way in which solutions are delivered now to clients is changing quite a bit. And in fact, you can teach people like me a couple of things on technology and how it's changing the landscape. The areas, if I was 25 years younger, and I wish I was 25 years younger, the areas which I would seriously look at this point in time, things like wealth management, which I think has a huge future ahead for all of us. Things like if you're sticking to India, then things like debt capital markets, which I think is just beginning to grow, and I think that it could be the next big thing which grows over the next 10-15 years. And I would look at asset managers. So whether it's mutual funds or insurance or even pension funds for that matter. So a lot of spaces besides banks which have come up over the last few years, which I think has a lot of promise for the future. Also, what old foggies like me will tell you about the traditional way of delivery of both trading and sales is changing. So already we're seeing in the foreign banks, sales is largely being taken over by technology. And in fact, it's a trend which is not worth fighting. It's just going to happen, where delivery will be through screens and through use of technology rather than through people actually being on behind phones and doing stuff. So be that as it may, there's still a lot of value to be done by being in structuring or by being in a different kind of sales delivery, really. So the options I would put out to you in terms of types of organizations would be, as I mentioned, asset managers, wealth management firms, banks, of course, research houses, credit rating agencies, and corporates. Places like Reliance, for instance, has a better dealing room than most banks in this country, right? And likewise with places like L&T, even to an extent, the software companies like PCS and Infosys, etc. So those would be the broad areas. I would also look at, in case you're not able to get through directly into any of these, or you don't like the ones that you get. I've seen some really successful people emerge by doing stuff which is slightly offbeat, like being in broking, for instance. You've got to be at the right place at the right time and all of that. But some of the best traders, some of whom have also been my bosses in a few places, actually came from a broking background. And they tend to be very, very savvy about the way in which they deal with markets. So those are the organizational types. In terms of professions per se, I think if you like trading, if you like risk, if you can manage and handle risk, absolutely, trading is a great place to be in. Asset classes like foreign exchange, etc., are becoming more and more technology based rather than through human interface. But in the less liquid kind of markets, including in emerging markets and in equities or in commodities or in debt capital markets, like I mentioned, there's still a lot of requirement for intelligent people to be in that industry. Sales, as I mentioned, is slightly tricky, especially in sales and banking. because there is a lot of technology going in there. But if you have a technology bent of mind, then if you like combining technology and markets, you could see a lot of good careers emerging there. So the traditional sales might be on a downswing, but technology enabled sales is definitely on an upswing. By the way, this trend hasn't caught on in Indian banks as yet. So if you go to an ICICI bank or if you go to an Axis bank, they still are largely a feet on street kind of a model. But eventually you will find them succumbing to technology as well. But besides the regular sales and trading, I would strongly recommend debt capital markets, like I mentioned earlier. I would also strongly recommend areas like risk management and asset liability management and balance sheet management, especially in the post-2008 crisis world, where regulations have become a lot more onerous, and risk management has become, core and front and center of a lot of banking management and financial services management. It's a very hot area to be in right now. Research is another area. If you like sitting and reading balance sheets or doing macro analysis, if you're a thinker and if you like coming up with ideas of that kind, that could suit you. Keep in mind though that in terms of pay, and a lot of us are motivated by money, it still remains largely a trader's world. Followed by areas like debt capital markets and sales and risk management. The research is somewhat lower on the pecking order.